Dayan. Okay. Good evening. It's a cover to have Dayan to join us here at the Evening Beis online to give a shiur on Pesach. So thank you very much, Dayan, for taking the time to join us. And we look forward to learning from this evening and Mitzvah Hashem for you to be able to join us when we're back in our real base of Medrash to be able to hear more Torah from you in the future.
Thank you very much, Shmuley, for your introduction. Just 1 minute. Are we okay? Is this being recorded? Is this being recorded?
Yes,
okay.
So that's okay with you?
Yes, please. Yeah. I just if you're recording it, then I would appreciate if you send it to me later. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so what we'd like to talk about this evening. Actually, it's the afternoon over here, but what we'd like to speak about is the mitzvah of the Shnei Tavshilin. When we look at the Ka'ara on in the Seder night, we have the matzahs, we have the moreh, we have the chareisas, we have the zroya and the beitza. The zroya, this is the common minig, is to use a shank bone and an egg. Now, just to get a little bit deeper into what this mitzvah is, where does this come from, and what's the purpose of it, and how to do this properly, and whether this year there's going to be something different about this din of the Shnei Tavshilin. So, first of all, the Mishnah in Pesachim, which if any of you are following the Daf Yomi, you might have learned it recently. The Mishnah mentions that what we bring before the Baal Habayis, Shnei Tavshilin. The Gemara speaks about the different opinions in the Gemara about what those two Tavshilin must be. Two Tavshilin sounds like two cooked things, cooked foods, and there are different opinions in the Gemara what they are supposed to be. The Shulchan Aruch tells us that brings a question of whether they should be cooked or roasted, tzoli or mavushal. Now, the Shulchan Aruch says that the minig is that the basar should be a zroya, and the minig as well, he says, is that the basar should be tzoli ala gecholim, should be roasted on the charcoal, and the beitza tiyeh mevusheles, and the egg should be cooked. The Mishnah Berurah explains on that halacha that really what's the purpose of these Shnei Tavshilin? The purpose of the Shnei Tavshilin is as a zeicher to the Korban Pesach and to the Korban Chagiga. In the times of the Beis HaMikdash, there were two korbanos that every Yid would bring in the Beis HaMikdash Pesach, and they were both eaten at the Seder meal. One was the Korban Pesach, and the other one was the Korban Chagiga. This Korban Chagiga is not to be confused with the another korban, which is also called Korban Chagiga, which was brought as a korban in other Yom Tovim, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. There was a Korban Chagiga that was brought. This Chagiga, in order to differentiate between this one and the other ones, is known as the Chagigas Yud Daled, the Chagigas Arba Asar, because to show that it's brought on the 14th day of Nisan, on Erev Pesach, rather than on the first day of Pesach itself. You know, the other Korban Chagiga is brought on the Yom Tov itself, the following day, and that's known as the Chagigas Chamisha Asar, the Chagiga of the 15th. Now, being that these two korbanos are no longer with us, we don't have, unfortunately, the Beis HaMikdash in order to bring these korbanos. So the Chazal instituted a zeicher, just like Chazal instituted a zeicher for other mitzvahs, like we take the lulav all 7 days on Sukkot, Zeicher LaMikdash. We count Sfiras HaOimer, Zeicher LaMikdash, although it's a mitzvah that only applies in the times of Beis HaMikdash, but we do it with the Rabbanan Zeicher LaMikdash. So over here, the Chachamim instituted that there should be Shnei Tavshilin, these two foods, two cooked foods, one as a Zeicher LaPesach and one as a Zeicher LaChagiga. Now, being that as it may, so there's a question over here about how to prepare these two foods. So what the Shulchan Aruch is saying is that the minig is, at least according to the Shulchan Aruch, according to the Mechaber, and I suppose that's what the Sfardim do because they follow the Mechaber, is that the basar, meaning to say the meat that is Zeicher LaPesach, what we would call the shank bone, the zroya, would be tzoli, would be roasted, because it's a Zeicher to the Korban Pesach, and we know the Korban Pesach must be prepared by roasting, not by cooking. The difference between roasting and cooking, obviously, is that roasting is a heat source without any liquid or water, and cooking means with liquid. And he says the beitzah, the Shulchan Aruch says, should be muvusheles, it should be cooked. And the Mishnah Berurah explains, obviously, because the Korban Pesach, we have two korbanos that we are commemorating. There's one korban, which is the Korban Pesach, that we're commemorating with the shank bone, and that is, since the Korban Pesach needs to be roasted, so this also needs to be roasted. The beitzah, the second item that we're putting on the ka'ara, is a zeicher for the Korban Chagiga. The Korban Chagiga does not need to be roasted; it can be cooked, and therefore it can even be a cooked beitzah. That is the shita of the Mechaber. The shita of the Ramo, however, and that is the minig of the Ashkenazim, is that the second one, the beitzah, should also be roasted. And here the Mishnah Berurah explains that the minig is to roast the beitzah as well. Why? If it's a zeicher to the Korban Chagiga and the Korban Chagiga was cooked or could be cooked, there's no hakpada that it should be dafka done with roasting. Why does the beitzah have to be roasted? And the Mishnah Berurah explains that there is a machloikas rishonim. Actually, there's a machloikas tanoim whether the Korban Chagiga is similar to the Korban Pesach in this respect, that it must be roasted or it can even be cooked. There is a Tana called Ben Tema, and just remember this name because we're going to mention it later. Ben Tema is of the opinion that the Korban Chagiga has many halachas like the Korban Pesach, and therefore the Korban Chagiga must be roasted just like the Korban Pesach needs to be roasted. And therefore, since there are Rishonim who paskin like Ben Tema, so therefore, according to these Rishonim, the Korban Chagiga must be roasted, and therefore we take the beitzah and we roast it in order to be yotzeh, even according to Ben Tema, who holds that the Korban Chagiga must be roasted. Now, just practically speaking, I've researched and have not seen anyone that says clearly, how do you roast an egg? As simple as it sounds like this was something very obvious to the poskim that discuss it. But usually, a whole egg is cooked by cooking it in a pot of water. That's what we are familiar with. And to talk about a tzliya of a beitzah is something that is foreign to us. So I do know that from asking around what people do, I found out that many people have the practice, and perhaps the practice is the same in what you saw in your house, your respective homes, is that many people, what they do is they cook up the egg in water, and then after it gets cooked, you take that hard-boiled egg and you put it over a fire until the sides, the shell gets somehow singed, gets blackened, and that is what they call a beitzah tzluya, and that's what they put on the ka'ara. Now, to me, this is a little bit difficult to understand that would be what tzliya of a beitza would be. First of all, because the Mishnah Berurah is saying that the reason why we roast the beitza, our minig is to roast the beitza, is in order to be yotze that shita that holds that the korban chagiga needed to be roasted. Now, what would be with a korban? Now, why is that? Because he said, Ben Tema says the korban chagiga has to be like the korban Pesach. Just like the korban Pesach has to be roasted, the korban chagiga needs to be roasted. Now, what would happen to the korban Pesach if someone would cook it and then roast it? Would that be considered? Would that be considered tzli eish? Would that be considered roasted to be yotze for the korban Pesach? And it's very clear from Tosfos and Psochim, Dafim Aleph. This has nafkaminas for Bishul on Shabbos. The Nishmas Adam points this out that tzoli is not mevatel bishul. That means the fact that something was already cooked cannot be changed to be considered roasted by roasting over the cooking. So if something was cooked already, and this is something that Bi'alacha says in Hilchos Shabbos, that if you cooked something and then you roasted it, you did not accomplish anything by doing that roasting. Meaning to say, on Shabbos, would that be considered malacha on Shabbos? But the fact that you cooked something already and now you went and roasted it over the cooking, so that would not be considered accomplishing anything. It's not. It wouldn't be considered a tzliya. It would still be considered mavushal because there's nothing about the bishul. Tzliya over bishul is not something that counts. So that's the first question. So if you would cook this egg and then put it over the fire, you would not be mekayim what we're trying to accomplish, which is to be tzoil of this egg. Another question is that why would this be considered a beitza tzluya? We know that when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos, there's a question if yesh tzliya acher bishul or ein tzliya acher bishul. So even if we'll say that yesh tzliya acher bishul, that means it's possible to take something which is already cooked and consider that a tzliya afterwards, that would only be considered a tzliya if after the bishul you take that item, that food, and you cook it, you roast it to the extent that the roasting goes through that food. But to just take the sides to just put it over a fire and get the sides a little singed, that's not considered a tzliya. If you would do that with a raw egg, you just take a raw egg and put it over the fire. I mean, maybe you might accomplish that the thing might crack open from the heat and spill out, but that wouldn't be considered a tzliya because you wouldn't have done anything. You won't accomplish anything with that. So similarly, if you take that cooked egg and if you take that cooked egg and you say to yourself, I'm going to put it over that fire, so it might look roasted, but it's not roasted at all. So some people are saying maybe since it's only a zeicher and we're just trying to make this look like it was tzoli, so as long as it has the looks of a tzoli, that would be good enough. I don't know if that's correct. I don't know of any raya that you can just do something fake. Would you be able to take some plasticine and just shape it into a roasted piece of meat? Would that qualify? I don't know. If it's a fake, if it's not really roasted, doesn't sound like that's what they're talking about when they say a beitza tzluya. It sounds like a roasted egg. Roasted egg sounds like something that was prepared with heat in a manner that roasting prepares food. That roasting changes the food. So it sounds like the place that we're talking about a certain mitzias that it's possible to take an egg and to roast it. And I believe that the reason why most people do this, again, if someone has a source that this is not this way, I'm very happy to hear, because I haven't heard of any source that says that to cook it and then singe it on the sides. I believe the reason why people do this is because they're really, practically speaking, if you would take a raw egg and put it over a fire, basically it would reach a point that the heat would just crack open the egg and everything would spill out, and then you wouldn't have anything left. But actually, after some experimentation in my kitchen, we came to I understood from the poskim that they're saying that you need to roast the egg. So we tried it out, and we came to the realization that taking an egg, raw egg, put it in an oven, heat up the oven to about, in America, we call it Fahrenheit. We go with Fahrenheit degrees, is 325. Celsius would be about 160, 165. You put the egg on the rack in the oven for about between 20 and 30 minutes. And you take it out and you'll see it's a cooked egg. It's basically looks and tastes just about like a hard-boiled egg. And that is a bona fide beitzat sluya. So if you want to do a beitzat sluya, lemahadrin, this would be I believe the best way to do so. Okay. Now, having said that, I just want to put another suggestion that it's recommended to put some sort of pan underneath, because it's possible if you don't get the heat right, it might spill in the oven and cause a mess. So if you want to do it like this, just put a pan underneath it's put on the higher rack and put a pan on a rack under that, so that if it spills, it will spill into the pan. Anyway, getting back to how does this affect the practice of the Schneider Shiur this year? So there's a special question about the Zerah and the Beitzah, and that is because Erev Shabbos this year Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbos. So I'm sure you've heard Shiurim on the topic of Erev Pesach Shchal b'Shabbos. There are many things different this year, and one of them is a question that the Pesach can discuss. Halacha l'maisa, it may not make an afgemina, but we'll bring it up for the sake of limud Torah. So this year, because Erev Pesach comes on a Shabbos, we know that the Korban Chagiga is not Deicha Shabbos. And there is a minig that we do, owing to the fact that the Korban Chagiga is not Deicha Shabbos, and that is that the order of the words min ha-zavochim u min ha-psochim gets changed this year. And that is when we say at the conclusion of Magid, we say the brocha asher ga'alonu v'go'alas aviseinu mitzrayim. So we concluded the tefillah, Kain Hashem Elokeinu. So Hashem, our God, lekeviseinu yagienu l'moyadim v'lergolim acherim. You should bring us to future Yom Tovim, which we will spend in the Beis Hamikdash. And v'noichal shom, we say ordinarily, we will eat there in Yerushalayim, min hazavochim umin hapsochim. That's what we say on a regular, ordinary year, is min hazavochim min hapsochim. Now, min hazavochim umin hapsochim refers to the zavochim is the Korban Chagiga and the psochim is the Korban Pesach. So ordinarily we say min hazavochim min hapsochim. When in the Haggadahs, invariably in the Haggadahs it says imchal b'motzoi Shabbos, then you say min ha-pesochim umin ha-zavochim. You switch around the order. The reason for that is because the Korban Chagiga, as we said previously, is not Deicha Shabbos. So when, again, getting back to the question, why is the Korban Pesach, why do we say the order of min ha-zavochim, min ha-pesochim? Because the Korban Pesach gets eaten after the Korban Chagiga. And the reason for that is that the purpose of the Korban Chagiga, at least according to the Chachamim, not like Ben Tema, but according to the Chachamim, is Kedei she'ha-Pesach nechel al hasoiva. The Pesach has to be eaten when one is satiated. So in order that people should be satiated when they come to eat the Korban Pesach, especially in the time when many people got only one kazayas of the Korban Pesach, so they brought a Korban Chagiga in order that people should be more satiated when they come to eat the Korban Pesach. So necessarily, the Korban Pesach, the Korban Chagiga needed to be eaten before the Korban Pesach, in order the Korban Pesach should be Nechal Asayva, because that's really the purpose of what the Korban Chagiga is coming for. So that is why ordinarily the Seder is that we say Minha Zavochim and then Minha Psochim. When Motzei Shabbos, when Pesach comes out Motzei Shabbos, since there is no Korban Chagiga, so therefore we say Minha Psochim u'Minha Zavochim, because you're not eating the Korban Pesach, you're not eating the Korban Chagiga before the Korban Pesach. Now there are other poskim who say that there's no reason to turn around the order, and I saw in a sefer that quotes a story about the Chazon Ish, that the Chazon Ish was at a Seder, and he said the regular order on Pesach Shechal Motzei Shabbos, and he said Minha Zvachim u'Minha Psochim, and someone asked him, why don't you turn it around? And he said the following reason: we are davening a tefillah, Kein Hashem Elokeinu yagi'enu l'moed l'kom lachem, we're davening to Hashem that we should be zoicha to future Yom Tovim, when we will have the privilege of eating the Korban Pesach and the Korban Chagiga. So we're not talking about this year, we're talking about next year or the year after that. We're talking about future Yom Tovim. The next year, very likely the Korban Pesach the Erev Pesach will not be Shabbos. And therefore, you won't have this issue of Minha Zavochim. You'll be able to do Minha Zavochim, Minha Psochim. And therefore, the Chazon Ish said, we don't turn around the order, and we say Minha Psochim, Minha Zavochim. There are other places, the Chazon Ish is not the first one, but there are other places as well who say that. Now, the question is really, so what is the reasoning behind our minig? Why do we say Minha Pesachim, Minha Zvochim this year, that we turn it around? We say Minha Pesachim, Minha Zvochim, and the question is Monashach. If what you're doing is that you are, if we're talking about this year, then this year there is no Korban Chagiga at all. So you shouldn't mention it. Just say V'nechal Sham Minha Pesachim. Don't mention Minha Zvachim at all. And if we're talking about the future, and the future there will be Korban Chagiga, so just say Minha Zvachim, Minha Pesachim, just like every year. So there is a pshat. The Machzah Shekel explains that obviously, since we're talking about Motzei Shabbos, that when Pesach comes out Motzei Shabbos, so we're obviously not, when we say Minha Zvachim, it doesn't mean the Korban Chagiga, it means other Kabbalas. There's another pshat we may possibly say, is that most Yishayin Paskin, the halacha like the Chachamim, not like Ben Taimah. According to Ben Taimah, the Korban Pesach, the Korban Chagiga is Deicha Shabbos. So according to those who paskin like Ben Taimah, and we're saying that that's why our minig is to do tzoli, to do the beitza tzluya, is to be yotze the sheet of Ben Taimah. And by the way, the support for the halachic Ben Taimah school of thought is the fact that we say in the Manashtana, halayla hazeh kulei tzoli. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, we said halayla hazeh kulei tzoli. Kulei tzoli is the mashma that we say that it has to be solely just like the Korban Pesach, which is the shita of Ben Taimah. Now, according to Ben Taimah, Tosfos says that Chagiga is Deicha Shabbos. So therefore, we say Minha Zvachim because maybe the halacha is like Ben Taimah. So therefore, we mention it, but we say it after the Pesach because if it's like Ben Taimah, then the Chagiga would not be nechal before the Korban Pesach, because it's only for the Rabbanah that we say that the Chagiga has to be eaten first in order that Pesach should be nechal asayv. Anyway, getting back to the question of the Shnei Tavshilin. So the Arishonim who say that when Pesach comes out Motzei Shabbos, we should actually not have to have at all the Beitzah. We should only have to have the Zroya, because since there is no Korban Chagiga, but since the Korban Chagiga is not Deicha Shabbos, you can't bring the Korban Chagiga if Erev Pesach comes out on Shabbos. So therefore, there should be no reason to have both a Zroya and a Beitzah. We should only have a Zroya, because there's only a Korban Pesach and there is no Korban Chagiga. So there are Rishonim who say, Enochanami, when Motzei Shabbos is the Seder night, you don't have to have a Beitzah. You just have to have a Zroya. Not only that, but they say that it's possible that we shouldn't even, there's a possibility, we shouldn't even have a Beitzah, even if you want to be Machmir for some reason, is because there might be a Michshel that will come out from that, because Meheri Yibana Miktosh, like the Gemara says, this idea about other things, that if we will bring it, if we will have a Beitzah, even when it comes out of Matzah Shabbos, then the following year, if again Pesach will come out on a Matzah Shabbos, then people will think that you're allowed to bring the Korban Chagiga even if Pesach comes out on Shabbos. So therefore, you should dafka not be makriv the Korban Pesach. Sorry, you should dafka not have a Beitzah on the Seder plate, on the car. But the other Rishayim, the other school of thought says that even when it comes out Matzah Shabbos, you do make a Zeicher L'Chagiga. And the reason they say is because if you're going to not make if you're not going to have a Beitzah, then it's going to appear as if this is an actual Korban Pesach and this is actual Korban Chagiga. The fact that you don't have it, the fact that you change, you do something different than other years by not having the Beitzah, appears as if this Beitzah is actually a Korban Chagiga, and that's why we don't have it here in the time when the Korban Chagiga is not supposed to be brought. And there's other reasons they say is because if you're going to bring the Korban Chagiga in a time when, if you're going to omit, if you're going to not have the Beitzah on the Seder plate when Pesach comes on Matzah Shabbos, then it's possible that other years people may forget to put the Beitzah there. So in order to make it just standard and equal to other years, that people shouldn't forget to do it next year, that's why we do halacha l'maisa, we do bring the carbon, we do put the Beitzah on the Seder plate even when it comes out Matzah Shabbos. And that seems to be the minig, that even this year, despite the many differences between this year and other years, there still is on the Seder plate will be the same as every year, the Korban Pesach, the Zroya and the Beitzah. We hope and pray that this year this discussion will not be relevant lamaisa, and we hope that this year we will have the Beis Hamikdash and we will have the Korban Pesach, and we won't have to have a discussion about making a zeicher to the Korban Pesach or to the Korban Chagiga, and we'll be able to bring the Korban Pesach and in Yerushalayim together.
Amen. Thank you so much, Dayan, for those words. For those joining us this evening, Rabbi Borden will be giving the Shabbos Hagol Drasha this Shabbos afternoon in the base. I think Mincha's at 5:50, and it's on Tashbisu and Mechirat Chametz. Please sign up because we've got limited spaces because of COVID. That's this Shabbos afternoon, Rabbi Borden. Good evening, all.